Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Darks podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are discussing Sentient by Jeff Lemire, Gabriel Walta, and I guess we should... Those are the two on the cover, but
yeah,
I think we're going to shout them out, Steve Wands.
Yeah, Steve Wands.
Especially since a lot of the lettering conventions that we noted in Descender are also present here. The shape of boxes and, indicating AI versus human. And
it's a pretty common thing. Anytime you have robots speaking, right, you use the robot font,
right.
Which if you don't know what that is, when I just said that and you heard it, you pictured it. Like everyone knows what robot font is, right? So
sure, there's robot font, but there's also the extra detail of colors, but also bubble.
I was gonna say the colors as well. They do, and especially, we're jumping ahead here. When we get to the other ship, when we get to Victor, it's a way to differentiate Victor and Valerie. So we have our two different AIs, and it's always perfectly clear, which one is speaking and who's speaking to whom, and again, those are little things that that the you would expect out of comics there, but still, when they're done and they're done well, it's supposed to be invisible, right? You're supposed to read it and just inherently know. So someone like Steve Wands, who's done as much work as he's done work specifically with Jeff Lemire, as you mentioned on Descender and Ascender again. A book dealing with both humans and robotics, as it were, machinery. Not I was gonna say not his first rodeo, but not their first rodeo together.
Yeah. So let's zoom out a little bit. First of all, this is the first entry in what we're calling Lonely Sci-Fi Month. That will be totally redefined next week when you go from a crew that's lonely in the middle of orbit to one human on a ship. But this week there's a different theme of loneliness. But first, I want to know, since we didn't have time in the zero, how did you find this book? When did you come to it? What drew you? Obviously, I'm going to guess I know what drew you.
Yeah, I came to this book at the same time I came to TKO because I was aware of TKO Studios. We mentioned this last week about those initial entries from TKO. There were that binge drop distribution scenario where all single issues, I think most of them were like 6 issues, all single issues came out at the same time on the same day as the trade came out. So you could either buy the physical single issues in a box set, you could buy the physical trade, or you could buy them digitally. All of that came out at the same time, all at once. Here you go, take your preferred method. And even though Sentient came out in wave 2, which was year 2 of this book, of TKO's kind of publishing, I had read Sarah, which is part of their first wave. That was the Garth Ennis, Steve Epting book, one of the first ones they put out. And so I was aware of TKO. They had advertised on some comic podcasts that I had heard before, I listened to. And obviously when I see the Jeff Lemire and Gabriel Hernandez Walta, like, I don't care what that is, I'm going to try to find that book wherever I can get it, and I'm going to read it.
Right. It could be the illustrated yellow pages, and I would read it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna follow along. So I read this when it came out in 2019. But I hadn't revisited. I hadn't reread it because I want to say this came out in late 20. I think I said it last week. I think it was like November 2019. So a few months before the world, went on the tubes, like really went on the tubes. But I remember reading it then, and obviously enjoying it because I love Lemire's writing and I love Walta's artwork. But it's that I hadn't revisited at all. I hadn't read it. I hadn't touched the book until you mentioned it for being part of this kind of theme month. So it was really cool to go back to it, almost, 6+ years later. Yeah, 6 years later and go back to it and be reminded and be like, oh, this is a really good, tight story. I really enjoy it. But it was fun to go back to it because I hadn't really remembered some of the elements, some of the specific elements. So it was like nice to go back and revisit that.
Yeah, I've got to say it was pretty well burned into my brain. However,
where did you find this book? Because you being a Lemire guy, were you here from the jump with this one in 2019?
Well, I thought I was from the jump I have my receipt pulled up. I purchased it April 13th, 2020. So
Mhm.
it was an early pandemic purchase for me.
Mhm.
I
Only like 5 months after it came out. So
Right.
like,
And that's probably the first time I heard of TKO.
yeah,
And a non-zero chance you told me about it.
yeah, you know what? Yeah, that I would like, hey,
Because I think even then you knew me as a Lemire guy.
yes, at that
Um,
point, yeah, I'm
but
sure after the first or second time I talked to you, I knew you were a Lemire guy. So yeah, there is a good chance I would have mentioned and be like, hey, there's a Lemire book. Maybe you didn't, because again, TKO was still real new at that point. They only released a handful of books. You know, they were doing this different style. So it tracks honestly on both who I am and who you are, that we would have taught at some point and been like, hey, by the way, there's this Lemire book that maybe you don't know about, you hadn't heard about, because I don't know if anyone's heard about it, because I don't know who knows about TKO. But yeah, so you mean you're still there early on. And I mean, this, although I guess a book like this does kind of read maybe a little differently at the beginning of 2020 like that, you know, because we're talking about lonely sci-fi, but there was a chunk of time there when loneliness and a version of loneliness, right? Abandonment or isolation, as it were, was a big theme coming out of books, people dealing with that. But reading a book about those kind of issues and in the moment probably changes a little bit of the context for you at the time.
I mean, that's very real. The realer one that I texted you about while I was rereading
Well,
it
now, yeah,
was
yeah.
the pre-having kids versus post-having kids. Now I've got two kids. At the time, I didn't have kids, thought I would never have kids. And stories about kids were just kind of like blah, 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 blah. But what I realized is that, I mean, Lemire really uses kids in a pointed way. And it
Very
makes
much
me
so.
want to go reread like Plutona,
Mhm.
a book that I thought was like meh. Um, but now that I'm like much closer to small children and imagine like, okay, well, in 4 years, if my daughter's playing with friends, finds a dead body in the woods, like what's that? What's that like? And that's where Lemire takes you. But if you're not a kid person, and I super wasn't before I had kids, um, you just kind of are like, so this is just a boring, smaller version of a regular person. That was what you're telling me. Um, so I would say I felt much more empathy in the gory bits of the first issue. And I will say that my recollection of this was that I really liked what was here, but I was really dissatisfied with how quickly the series ended. And I think that is probably the biggest 2020 piece of it all,
Yeah.
because I ripped this thing open. I ordered it April 13th. I'm sure it arrived like April 17th or something.
You probably read it that
Ripped
day.
it open. Oh, I don't even think I left. Like I grabbed it from the mailbox, sat on the couch, opened the package, read them all, and was
Yeah.
like, "That's it. What am I supposed to do the rest of the day?" Um, so I think that was a big piece of it. Now that I've read it, I'm just like, well, it's perfect. It's like the perfect length. It gets in, it tells the story it's telling, and it gets back out. Could it have been longer? Absolutely. Would I read a follow-up series? More than likely,
Okay.
but I have no complaints
I,
about the length.
I actually have a question about that, because it's something we always talk about with this, not just endings, but the idea that this book ends with a completion of the story that we got, like a full, like we know that.
The story is about the journey, not the
Yeah,
destination.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and we don't even see the back, like most of the journey, right? The conflict ends, and then page turn. These kids have made it to the colony, and we don't see them interact. Like there's some narration box of like, yeah, the colonists there were like, how did these kids survive? Blah blah. Doesn't matter. We just
Right.
smash cut to the kids trying to reactivate Valerie, right? And
Right.
there's a sense of like, oh, what's the next story there? And he does that thing of like, there could be another story, there could be a follow up. Would you want, outside of your desire just to read more Lemire, and the same thing I have as well?
More non-horror Lemire. Big
What
caveat.
do you do you actually want a follow up to this in terms of adding to this narrative? Because
In
the way,
2020, I did.
well,
Reading
yeah,
it now,
I'm
no.
saying now. Okay, okay, yeah,
Although I would love that pocket story of maybe like three issues of when they take over Victor's ship, how they actually make it home without the AI assistant at all. Like the thing that I think that was what frustrated me on the initial read was that text box that says, these colonists were wondering, like, how did the kids make it home, make it to the colony without an AI or any adults or anything. I'm like, yeah, that's the story I signed up to read. How did they do it? I thought that's what we were doing. But it wasn't that.
It was the story. Yeah.
Right. It is not a survival story in space. That is an element of the story. The story is, as they frame it from the beginning, about their mother, which is the sentient AI. Now, had I been smart enough to just sit there and reread the thing, then I think I would have noticed that bookend and said, like, oh, it opens with introducing, even though they have parents at the beginning, which I forgot that they ever had parents. I thought it was like, kids being sent into space. I forgot about that really gory.
The whole first issue. Yeah, that first issue is all they have all their parents are, they start alive and it ends with them all dying. So,
like mostly gruesome ways.
Pretty gruesome, yeah.
And getting more and more gruesome as the series goes on.
Yeah.
And that, and I thought, I would also read, I'm not saying he should do this. I'm not even saying it's a good idea. I'm just saying, in order of things I would read, I would actually be much more interested in the prequel and learning about the Separatists and like whatever other factions were back on Earth.
Yeah.
It was unclear to me what the Separatists, what they were separating from.
Yeah, well, and there are world building questions, and again, we're talking about a book that doesn't exist, nor the intention of the book itself. That's one of those things that, like, I would love to know more about that, but I don't need to read that in comic form. Like I don't, like, what I'm saying? Like,
right.
That's like, to me, like if he had like back matter stuff of like, here's the history of this world and how we got here, I'd read like 5 or 6 pages of that just to get a sense of place of what they're leaving and what it's like on this colony and how long this has been going on. From a purely academic standpoint, though, like I don't need that from a narrative standpoint, but just from a world building standpoint, I agree. I would love more of that. So I'm not sad we don't get that, because I can recognize that like the story isn't about that, obviously, because if it were, they would put that in. So I don't feel that's lost, but I am with you. There are questions when you zoom out a little bit, just be like, what exactly is happening here? Like they kind of gloss over, because the assumption is that all the adults on the ship, like they know what's going on, right? You don't have that scene of someone explaining things to characters who should already know what's happening.
Right.
There's that scene sometimes in very bad writing when someone is explaining a situation because the audience has to know, but they're doing it to someone that obviously would already have this information.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like the worst one when someone's like, "Hey, sis, remember when we did this?" So like, I've never called my sister sis. I've never called my brother bro. And
your recollections are like, hey, remember that thing that one time with the dude, and it's like, oh yeah, that was great. You don't you don't actually have to spell it out for someone. There's an inherent shorthand.
Nor do I have to define our relationship from the outset of each sentence.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things where I'm like,
it's a narrative.
Can you trust your artist to make them look like family, like make them look similar enough? Now, in this case, if Jeff Lemire were the artist, it'd be like, okay, maybe it's helpful to like, to lay out some of the relationships because everyone looks the same.
But again, this idea that them, because I do think the intention, the way I read it, especially this time going back to it and revisiting it, the intention of the reader feeling a little bit at loss and not knowing what's happening in the world, it seems obvious on a reread that was intentional because the kids are thrown in. When they get to the refueling station and Lil is trying to answer these questions from this guy who's been there and genuinely has no idea what's going on. Because why would she? She's a 10-year-old kid. The idea of putting the reader in the idea of that there is an acknowledgement of larger forces at work, You know,
Right.
they would be aware of this stuff, maybe even just barely vaguely, but not having the specifics. Because why would they? So why would the reader need to know that? It's them putting you in the shoes of the kids of just trying to get through this, of not knowing what the larger machinations are. Because again, that's not the story they're trying to tell here. It isn't about what happens on this new Earth colony and what's happening with the separatists, and the conflict is just something that happens. And so I think putting the reader in that same or similar headspace as our characters, our children characters, I think is totally the point.
Yeah. Can we talk briefly about this villain plan?
Sure.
Because I just have to say, like, I know you needed the moment to get the thing rolling, and that's fine. But I'm like, okay, so let me replay this in my mind. You don't want these children to be tainted by, the horrors of life on Earth and what culture had become, presumably moral decay, in addition to environmental collapse and yada, yada, yada. And your solution is traumatize them all
Yeah.
with the death of their parents.
Yep.
It's like, it feels like, again, it's not a plot hole because that's not really a plot point even. It's just this happened.
It's a hole in her plot.
Sure, yeah, it's a hole in her plot, right?
It's a hole in her plot, not in the
right. It's like it feels very Bond villain is what I'm going to say about it. It feels like this feels like the type of thing that someone would do because there's one thing that matters most to them, and they're willing to ignore every other implication or detail.
Needed to bounce this plan off of one other person. Just to have them go, maybe
just bat around the writer's room for 5 more minutes, just work with
it needed
a little
cook.
Collaboration.
Yeah, just a few more minutes in the oven, took it out a little early. I mean, obviously it's a bad plan. Obviously,
but even if it had been like, look, I'm not saying, even if it had been trick them all into the vacuum lock and release them all into space and have them killed that way, so that at least their corpses and blood aren't all over the ship for the children to find.
Yeah, you could play it off as like an accident, right?
Right.
Or something like that. Or they left you because they're terrible people, and I have the truth, or something like that. I don't know. Part of me thinks a better plan, but maybe I don't know, would have been like, my goal is to just destroy everyone on the ship. Everyone, kids included, because this is a terrible thing. Like, humanity needs to end, or something like that.
Right, but then why get on the ship to begin with?
I mean,
it sounds like staying on Earth was the off ramp she was looking for.
Yeah, that is true. That'd be a philosophical flaw in that plan as well.
But it doesn't. I said from the outset, it does not matter.
Yeah. It doesn't matter because she fails at it, obviously, because she dies. Valerie, they managed to kind of jailbreak Valerie out of her protocol, and they kill her. But yeah, you're right. It is a bad plan, but it is just there to be like, oh, now the kids are all by themselves. So, however they need to accomplish that first step isn't really important. But yes, from an objective point of view, really bad plan.
Yeah. Some serious failed considerations, and just whatever. But and also, it was unclear to me, her plan was to be the only living adult.
I think so, yeah. And then to shepherd these kids to the colony, but have them be on the separatist side when they get there, I think, which is why she had to wait until they were in the year-long blackout zone. So, no one can make any transmissions, I think. Right.
That part was pretty clear to me. Yeah, and that actually was pretty well thought through.
Yeah. But it seemed to be the whole idea was that she would be presenting herself to the children as, no. Basically, everything you've been told is a lie. This is what really is happening. So when we get to this new colony, like, they've got a bunch of, I don't know, radicalized children, maybe not child soldiers, but people sympathetic to their cause, their separatist cause, I guess. I don't know.
All right. I can buy that.
Yeah.
So what do you think the main content of like what is, if there's a message to this story, what do you think it is? And actually, before that, do you think this book would be written differently by Lemire in 2026 with the way we now view AI?
With respect to AI, interesting.
Because this was a very hopeful, like, look how helpful AI can be. And under the right circumstances, it could even be a surrogate parent with good intentions. It's kind of like,
well, I actually don't know if he would, because when we say AI now, we are not talking about the AI on Sentient. We're not talking about Jarvis in the MCU or anything like that. We're not talking about
we're talking about slop.
We're talking about AI generation, right? We're talking about taking things that exist and reformatting something that is fed into it versus like actual, like self-producing thought, like the comp here would be what we saw in the Matrix, right? Actual like self-awareness and intelligence of actually because if you had an actual AI, let's say an AI chatbot or an AI art prompt or whatever, and you gave it a prompt and it actually generated its own art versus cobbling together from something it's been fed, that's what we're talking about here in terms of what this artificial intelligence is.
I think that's a good distinction, is that
So
this is talking about
yeah
sci-fi AI, not real world AI.
Yeah. So I don't know if the content would be any different. Maybe the verbiage would be different. Maybe you would find a way to not call it AI. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know how you'd work around that. Because that those two letters carry such a connotation now.
Right. Which is interesting because, I have been kicking around like writing my own comic for years now that involves an AI type thing. But even 3 years ago when I drafted the thing, I was like, but like AI is like this generative crap that people are thinking of, and people are never going to believe that, like, that it could be capable of X, Y, and Z. So now I got to come up with a new name for it. Which I did, but then I didn't do anything with, because kids.
Yeah. So from a content standpoint, I don't know. I think that the story still works because again, we're talking about a level of intelligence of like that is beyond what we have now. It's something people aspire to, but it is still the realm of science fiction.
Right. People are
yet.
trying to sell us that what we have now is this.
Absolutely.
And that's the real problem.
Absolutely. But it is totally not. Like whatever AI crap assistant on your phone, like that's not what Valerie is. That's not what Jarvis is. Know
Your station. I forget what the name of that one was. Yeah.
But that idea of what artificial intelligence is still the realm of sci-fi. Now you can make the argument that maybe that's what something like Jarvis started as. And I think even Tony Stark says that at some point, like how Jarvis started and what he evolved into. But still the idea of that level of awareness for machine just doesn't exist yet. And if we reach that point of artificial intelligence, like the next step there is just the Matrix. Like if we have machines that actually have intelligence in that way, like then humanity is truly screwed. Right now, we're just screwing ourselves over with the AI that we're calling AI and its proliferation. We're doing this to ourselves. But if we ever reached Valerie level of AI in our world, if we ever got to that point, then we have far more problems. Because you're right, the idea that it wouldn't be Valerie, it would be Victor.
Right.
It would be far more of an aggressor versus a protector. Because
that's okay. So that's interesting because this time I did read it and think there's still a chance they're wrong about Victor and that crew. Like it does seem like that crew got a little unnecessarily aggressive for what the situation was. It was like, okay, why don't we agree to shadow you, for 2-3 days, and then we'll talk about docking again, if you're really interested in the best interest of the kids.
Well, and
I could also see it being like just bureaucrats who are like, no, the protocol would be that we board you right now and you do this. Why are you not doing this? You're acting weird.
well, so the problem with that pirate ship was like when Lil asked to speak to a human, like there are humans on board there. Just have one come on and be like, yeah, I'm the captain.
Right.
That
like, that was strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's because they're incompetent, but it's also meant to be like they're the bad guys. They are the bad guys. And part of me also thinks, I don't know if this is the message of the book, going back to that earlier question, like 20 minutes ago now, whenever you asked it. I don't know if this is a message, but I think it's something that's depicted here. I don't think Valerie and Victor as AIs inherently have any sort of intention, protocol or not. But because Valerie was tasked with raising these children and Victor was influenced by what were basically space pirates.
Right.
And so the idea of nature versus nurture going the opposite direction, that what they were in charge of and what they interfaced with had an influence on what their artificial personalities were. Or actual personalities. I don't know. We're talking about them as people or as beings. At this point, it's irrelevant to this book. But the idea that the reason that Valerie acts a certain way and Victor acts a certain way is because of the people they were in charge of, or in charge of them, or vice versa. The environment that they were working in. These children that Valerie was prompted or directed, commanded, or whatever to protect, versus this AI of the ship that's being taken over by pirates. The idea that this is what we do: we go out, we raid ships, blah blah blah. So it is aggressive in nature because that's the protocol, that's the environment that it's been shepherded in at this point. Because it didn't start that way, presumably, right? That was a colonial ship at one point.
That's the interesting question. Like, I wonder if that ship ever had children on it, and if having children is the difference for why Valerie is different.
Could be.
And hear me out, because Valerie, most of what she knew was observing parents with children. I loved when she said something reprimanding to one of the kids.
Lil,
she said, Lil is like, I know you heard my mom say that. Don't say that. That's creepy. But like Val was like, this is how I know how to talk to you. Like, this is all I know. Like, it's kind of, it is in many ways the complete opposite of what our AI is, because this is a thinking one that is a closed loop of information. Like, she doesn't have an internet or neural net out there that she can connect to because they're so far out of reach. She can only use the input of what's already on the ship. Yeah, and what's on the ship is parents and children. So that's what she learned.
Valerie doesn't have the input on how to be a parent. Valerie has the input on how to be the parent to these specific kids.
Yes.
They're not pulling from parenting.
She's not like, I just read every book on parenting.
Exactly. It's what Valerie knows is just what the interaction of these kids with their parents specifically, not all parents, just how to deal with these children. And I think part of that comes into when Valerie started assigning roles on the ship, right? It shows that Valerie had a level of knowledge, of understanding, because they'd been watching these children. So understanding what kind of skills they have, and maybe how to talk to them, how to deal with them, because they watch their parents do that. Their birth parents. You're that closed loop feedback, I think, is a good way to put it, versus the idea of like quote unquote infinite knowledge, right? They're not trying to parent these kids, quote unquote, by the book, because there is no book. It's just relying on what passes for memory for AI, which is like a literal memory bank.
Yeah. See, I found this aspect so much more interesting now,
Sure.
that we're dealing with things that call themselves AI
Mhm.
than I did in 2020, where AI really was primarily existing in whatever form the author said it was.
In sci-fi, in this
Right.
form, in this form.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This was how sci-fi people all agreed that AI was.
Yep.
And so we all just kind of accepted it. We're like, yep,
Mhm.
sure, that sounds right.
Yep.
Um, and now I think readers rightly are like, we have some follow-up questions.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
we've seen AI and it ain't this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The AI we've been given is not this. Um, And the question is, do we want to get to this? Is what we have now supposed to be a stepping stone to get to something like this? And if it is this what we want? Do we want actual artificial generation? Actual awareness and sentience. Where the name of the book here is that something we actually want? And is the stuff we have now, the crap that we have now, is that meant to be a stepping stone? I don't think it is. I think what we have now is people being lazy and being like, this is a way to make a buck and things like that. This is not about a step towards furthering technology at all, in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have now is something they can tell investors is AI
Yes.
and cutting edge and
Yeah.
inflating stock value for short-term things
Yeah.
while
And
also trying to wreck the workforce.
yeah,
So just, lots of good things with all pure motives going on.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think if you're someone who is working on this actual kind of AI, like you wouldn't be working on it by feeding things into it, right? Because the whole idea of if this thing can only generate things that are fed into it, based on what the information you give it, then you have not reached actual sentience. The whole idea is, if you're trying to reach this point here, is have the machine generate its own idea, you know, and follow that logic down. I'm sure there's someone out there working on it, probably because it's been in sci-fi for as long as we've had science fiction, right? As long as we've had machines, thinking machines, someone has thought of the idea of, well, what if the machine thought for itself? So
Right.
like that's an idea as old as storytelling has been. But that's not what we're getting. It's not what we're being presented now. So yeah, I said, I don't know if we're on the road to anything like this. But this still, even in our current world, this still seems like science fiction to me, right? This still seems far off. Do you agree with that? Like this still seems like a level above anything we're ever going to see.
There's some quantum leap between what
Yes.
we have and what
Yeah,
there's here.
yeah.
Like there's
and what we have
some
now is not a step. Is not a is if it's a step, it's like a half baby step versus like the exponential leap we would have to make, right?
right.
Yeah.
I think yeah. I was just thinking strictly from like a processing power and energy consumption.
Yeah.
I do think it is a step that way, showing us literally like what it would take and how without renewable resources, we just do not have the infrastructure for this. But I think that's really the only revelation is that like,
Yeah.
oh, if you actually want AI, this thing that's calling itself AI is literally drowning absorbing a small lake every time you ask it a question. It's not going to get better as that gets more demanding and more advanced. So you better figure out some type of sustainable renewable energy. But anyway, loneliness. We gotta get there.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that's a very interesting take on loneliness because um, I think the loneliest characters in this are not even necessarily the children. It's the other people they interact with. Like the guy on the refueling station.
Yeah.
That's the epitome of lonely. That's the Matt Damon character in Intergalactic.
Yeah. Or
Small
that David
spoiler,
character on The
12 years
Martian.
later. Anytime Matt Damon's in space.
Yeah. But no, but I still think our kids though, because the idea of loneliness, there is a level of abandonment. No, that's tough because all their parents were killed. It wasn't their choice. But also
No, they
isolation.
still experience abandonment, whether someone abandoned them on purpose or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, we mentioned part of the narrative plan was they're in this transmission blackout zone. So even if even if the parents had existed, if they had lived, they would still be completely self-contained. You know, that ship is on its own for a year with no transmissions to or from it. So they are in a natural isolation point, you know? So even though there would be a crew of people, they're all they have. And there's still something about that of being, that's what, you are lost in, and they're not lost, but they are in space by themselves. And this book just kind of ratchets that up one by having only survivors be children. So, but even in their pre-murdered state, they were still in a state of isolation from everything else. You know, they were in between where they came from and where they were going, and they had no. If anything had gone wrong, like if the deaths of the parents had been an accident, they would still be by themselves. You know, it didn't have to be deliberate murder. If something goes wrong, there's nothing they can do to help anybody. There's nothing there.
Well, and I think
so
the most potent thing for me is there is this idea that I'm trying to think out, like you can be perfectly lonely with other people around. Like that's
totally, yeah.
They're not mutually exclusive. Like just because you're on a ship with other children does not mean you're not feeling the loneliness of space and the big empty of it all.
We see that here, right? The one child whose name I can't pull up right now, who initially is ostracized, right? Because his mom is the one that started the coup. You know?
Yes.
So
Isaac.
I think that's what it is. Yeah. You're right, because there is loneliness, there is isolation. There are different parts of that, and you don't have to be physically by yourself in order to feel those things. And I think that's one thing that Sentient does really well, is showing different versions of that. We even see it after the fact, right? After they've been for a few months and everyone's gotten jobs from Valerie and kind of figuring out how to exist and keep going, we see that Lillian is now isolated. You know, she's now alone because she's the one who still, as a 10-year-old child, is pouting in a room, right? The one who wants to do the more, the one who feels like she's being, that Valerie doesn't let her do the thing she's supposed to do. You know, how many times does she say over and over again, I'm the oldest here. You told me I'm the oldest crew member. You told me I'm the one who's supposed to be taking care and watching everybody else, but you don't let me do anything. Very petulant child type of behavior, not unreasonable in a normal sense. That's how you would expect a child to behave, but fairly unreasonable in their unreasonable circumstances. But she feels a level of isolation because she believes she can do more and should do more and all this stuff. She has this desire and she feels like she's being held back.
Yeah. Which I could not believe how much time was dedicated to that argument over who got to dock the ship in the fueling station. But I think it shows you it set up the necessary, I think if that hadn't gone on so long, you wouldn't really believe that Lil was dumb enough to leave the ship.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's why it had to happen that way.
Well, of course, yeah. There is narrative structure there, but again, it's another way that this book just can demonstrate that, right? That Isaac was isolated, but now he's part of the crew because he's the person in charge of tech and communications.
He's the guy in the chair,
and then. Yeah. And Lil, who started off as the one in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy of she's the one that steps up, she's the one speaking for the kids, protecting them. So we see her immediately as a leader, and then hard cut to a couple months later, and she's the one pouting in a room, So showing the way that isolation and loneliness can shift and change depending on the dynamic of the group and where you are and how long you've been out there. And the idea that it's a constantly moving target, that it's not just one thing, that it can change over time. I think that's something that's sentient that Lemire and Walta did really good in this book. They did very, very well in terms of its depiction, that there are multiple stages, multiple ways in which you can feel isolated and alone, even when you're not.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, right. That's like one of those, if someone were clinically depressed and they said they were feeling lonely, and it's like, what do you mean you're feeling lonely? You live in a crowded apartment building and you have this,
Yeah.
this, and this. It's like
You go to work every day with your
not
coworkers.
related.
Yeah.
Yeah, like those aren't factors
Exactly.
in what's going on here. And so it really doesn't matter if you are a character who is not connecting with people around you. It does not matter if you're on a spaceship in the middle of space or you're in a small town and you are too young to drive. Like, you are stuck, you are isolated, you are in this place, and you're lonely because you're not connecting with anyone. And so I would say, maybe I shouted out some similarity to Platona earlier, just because it's a batch of kids doing a thing. But I was like, actually, a lot of the themes in this feel closer to like Essex County.
There is, yeah. I mean, the idea, because so many of his
Insular
life,
family
Lemire slice of
drama.
life, yeah, but it's rural country, right?
Right.
You're out there.
This is rural space.
Yeah, I mean, On the Water Welder, his current book, Minor Arcana, Essex County. Those are all set in kind of isolated places, so where the people themselves are isolated. It is a theme that recurs throughout a lot of Lemire's creator-owned work, especially often the stuff that he writes and draws himself. Little different here with Walta being on the art here, but it is a theme that recurs, and the sense of, you mentioned at the top, this idea of, I was going to say children in peril, but not always in peril, but the idea of dealing with children or the next generation, or how kids see the world, whether they're actual kids or, like this book here, you already mentioned Plutona. Royal City is about kids growing up. It's a coming of age. Sweet Tooth is about a child and a father figure. That so many of his books are May's book is even though that's told from a parent's point of view, it's about children. So that is it's a theme that recurs through a lot of his stuff. And if Lemire tells the story himself, if he writes and draws himself, it ends up being in a small rural Canadian town, right? But I guess he works with Hernandez Walta, and now we're in space, that brings the sci-fi element to it, maybe more so than Lemire would do on his own. But there's still those same kinds of themes of isolation, of abandonment, of loneliness, just put into a different environment here. And this one just happens to be in space, and it happens to fit the theme that we're going for, this month.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I loved this book. I was so happy to reread this. Happier than I like picking it for the theme was just based on like the front cover picture that's in my head. Like it's a lonely ship floating in space.
Yep.
And I remembered that there were not adults on board. And it was like, cool, lonely in space. All right, I think I've got a theme running here. Did not remember. I remembered the plot, but not the emotional beats.
Yeah.
I didn't really wrestle with the loneliness of it.
Is there a specific moment for you, or maybe moments that, because you mentioned how your perspective obviously has changed from when you first read this pre-kids to now with children. Is there a moment that you can like pick out that is specifically not necessarily hits harder or more emotionally, but that you like, an image on a page or a sequence that you definitely know you're like, you read it now and you're like, oh, I was not aware of this, or I did not pick up on this the first time. Like, do you have a moment like that when it first really hit?
I think it just shows how emotionally numb I was the first time I read it. But in the first issue, where she goes with the gun into the nursery, and you see
Yeah.
like the childcare woman say,
Yeah.
don't do this, please don't do this. And you hear Lil say Val, and then you see the woman's glasses with a hole through the left eye on the ground with blood,
Yeah.
and then the children are just like covering their mouths, looking horrified and traumatized. And then the unspeakable claws of Val coming gut through
Through
the
her
chest. It's
chest.
just
Yeah.
like, okay, we feel like long term feel safer, short term, holy, like what
Yeah.
just happened? And like, and the way Gabe Walta, I don't think we've given enough praise to his art. I mean,
We haven't. No.
I think we just love him so much that we're leaving it unspoken. But then it pans to, Val calling out to everyone, and you see
Yeah.
all of the dead bodies and the blood
Yeah.
coming out of the parents' faces. Um, but the most potent, I think, to me was when, uh, Val is begging the children not to cry as they're gathered around their parents' bodies. And Lil's like, no, you have to let them like touch their parents. It's like that, it's very hard not to put yourself in that situation of like, if I'm dead, do I want my daughter coming, at age 7
Sure.
or 8 or whatever, and like feeling my face and seeing all of this blood and see my lifeless body, or would it be just better left to the imagination?
And the idea that the way I read that with Lil is like, you have to give this to them, otherwise they're not going to accept it. Like they're not going to know how to. There's no way to process this. Probably even speaking for herself, right? There's no way for us to process this unless we see it.
Right.
This is not something you can be told. That these children have to see it, and
And
they have
depending on
to.
how young,
Yeah.
seeing isn't even comprehending,
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe not in the moment. But the idea that it's that idea of closure, right? For anyone dealing with any level of loss or grief, the idea that as hard and as trying as that may be, like that is at least closure, right? Versus being told someone you love, someone you care about has gone and is passed, but there's no evidence of it other than you all you have is your thoughts and your ideas and your imagination of it. So not having that sense of closure can be difficult for anybody. And so Lil in that moment, having that level of like emotional maturity, and then her saying like, I'll be the one to actually hit the button to open the airlock.
Yeah, it's, you see a great leap forward there, for on her 10th birthday. Gosh.
Yeah.
Um, but then turning all of her rage on Isaac is like,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
that's childish, but also
still being
a
a child.
40-year-old would do that.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah,
Very true.
that's part of the grief process.
Yeah.
And then those pages, like issue 2 is my favorite, because those pages when Isaac walks away,
Issue
and
2 is hard.
one, you start to get the scope of like how big that chip is. Cause like I always forget, even watching like Star Trek, how big the Enterprise truly is.
Like how
like-
big it's supposed to be.
How big it's
Yeah.
supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
Because like the scale doesn't always seem to do it justice. It's like, so if you can zoom in like through the glass into the cockpit, that gives me some sense of scale. And you're telling me thousands of people live on here,
Yeah.
or whatever. But anyway, you see him walking through all these big empty hallways, the monitor following the whole way.
It's
And then
dark, the way it's colored. Yeah.
the way it's colored, the way it's drawn, the emotions on all the kids' faces are so well done.
Yeah.
But this, that page where, she says, I believe you. And he says, you do. And she says, yes, humans display numerous physiological changes to their body when they are lying. I'm able to tell within 98th percentile when someone is lying. And he said, oh. And then she says, but even if I could not tell, I would still believe you, Isaac. I have watched you watched and recorded every moment of your life on this vessel, and I know that you are a good boy. And then, he can't accept good things, so then he pivots to they all hate me.
Yeah.
Lil and the other kids hate me.
Yeah. There is the issue 2 is hard, But issue two, I think, is because that showing the aftermath, and you're right. I hadn't even thought about that beforehand, but the idea that the way that the kids are acting, they are reacting as children, but you're right, they're also acting like anyone would in the situation. Going through and not knowing how to process what just like a traumatic event that just happened, and turning to anger, turning inward, lashing out. All these are things we see in anybody. It's not just because they're children. Our perspective is different because we know they're children and they are children. But you're absolutely right. This idea of Lil immediately turning out and trying to blame somebody,
Right.
because in the moment, that feels better, even though.
Well, and she has just inherited a workload that she never should have had.
Yeah,
and it's someone's fault.
Yeah.
It's like, and you're the one who's here
solely because she's the oldest,
because she just turned 10 today.
Yeah.
This is her 10th birthday present. It's like navigating the future of the human race through space with an AI surrogate parent.
Yeah.
I think this was actually probably a pretty tough elevator pitch, but I'm guessing TKO didn't really require an elevator pitch from Lemire Walta. It was probably like, you guys want to do a book? Great.
Yeah. I think there's a reason why, they I'm sure I have a feeling because
TKO books are a little taller, right? Like they're a little oversized.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on that. They are the size of which they don't fit in standard bags and boards.
Yep.
So you pretty much have to keep them in the special box that it came in. Yeah. Don't get me started on that. But
that's fine. I put it on the trade paperback shelf in the special box.
But yes, there is a sense of TKO just, hey man, we want creators. Come and you got a story to tell, come tell it. The oversight, they're just, their thought, I'm sure it was at the beginning, was just, let's get some banger creators out here. Do you guys got a story to tell? You got 6 issues, go, make it all, do the whole thing, and we put it out all at once, which I don't know how creators feel about that, but if they get paid for it at a decent page rate and they own the rights or whatever, I'm sure they don't mind. So yeah, it was just, I'm sure it was just a matter of, we got this cool story, let's just tell it, and this is what it's an idea they wanted to explore. Because it is one that is, it's pretty tropey. I can think of examples. The first one I think of is Space Camp. Have we talked to the movie before?
I don't think so. It sounds vaguely familiar, but I've definitely not seen it.
A bunch of kids go attend space camp at Cape Canaveral, and while they're like in the cockpit of the spaceship, like it launches and they go into space. And so like you have a bunch of kids in space having to get back. I remember it being awesome. I'm sure it's terrible if we'll watch it again. There's actually a book right now. It's a distillery book called Endeavor. It's writer Stephanie Williams and Mark Lamming as an artist. It's not sci-fi, but it is actually a very similar concept. A group of very rich and wealthy families are taking a trip that recreates the journey of the HMS Endeavor. So they're on a period accurate ship, but they've got some nice amenities or whatnot. And yeah, all the parents die. All the parents get sick and die. And so you got a bunch of kids, 7 or 8 kids who are now left on this ship trying to figure out how to survive. So it's got a Lord of the Flies or Yellow Jackets feel to it. Two other books that are this similar idea of children, groups of children being left together somewhere for some reason and having to fend for themselves, right? Having to figure out what society is, how to interact with each other. The spin here is that they had some level of guiding force in Valerie, but this idea of children alone, children isolated through extraordinary circumstance, is one we see in fiction a lot.
Well, but it takes a different, it believes in the innocence and purity of children, and therefore in humanity apart from society. Yeah. Whereas, what's the furthest place from here?
Yeah.
is all children,
Yeah.
although those are more
Y- y-
adolescents, kids
Yeah.
on bike age,
Yeah.
and they're all troublemakers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but it that is similar to the idea of Lord of the Flies, right? Where you are viewing that as commentary on society, right? These are children, but at some point it devolves into the way society is and things like that. What the furthest place from here is similar. This idea that it would just devolve into the just like lawlessness or whatnot. I do agree that this is a more hopeful. This idea of like the children are the future, and if guided properly, like the children will make the right choice,
Right.
which is not
Without adults, like they're not going to invent politics.
Yeah. They're not going to be marred by that and by the adult world. In either direction, kind of yay or nay, they're going to find the level of like how to treat people and how to exist and how to be around each other, because you're right, there's a benefit to that level of to that ignorance, to the naivety that comes with being a child and experiencing the world and seeing the world through those eyes. So that that
You're
does
sounding
make
a
it
lot
little
like a separatist, I have to say. Whatever that is.
I don't know what that is, but if it puts me on the opposite side of our current reality and world and the way things are,
That's true. I'd
you know what?
separate, yeah. Separate from that.
Doesn't seem like a bad idea. Doesn't seem like a bad spot to be right now. So,
Well, that's the end of my notes, but I certainly open it up for more from you, especially if you want more shout out for Walta, because I can't believe we haven't talked about a Walta book yet.
I guess I don't have any more kind of specific theme.
Some beautiful splashes,
There is some really great stuff there. I will say, I think one thing that I'm really enjoy is the wrong word. I'm not going to use that. Impressed with, I think, is that I'll frame it in the way that you talked about in that early second issue there, the idea of like the facial reactions, the way he does the children there, because he has to draw some really gruesome stuff, and like to the number of dead bodies in the control room, right? The way the blood is seeping out of the eyes and all that stuff, like characters getting impaled by giant like random claw, like why is there a claw coming out of the wall? What's that for? I don't know. But like all of that there, characters getting shot in the face and the head. Like there's a lot of fairly gruesome and graphic stuff that he has to deal with. And at the same time, he has to draw these kids in a way that are both reacting in terror, in confusion, in fright, but also at some point at the end, like when Lil shoots that one pirate in the face, like has to show some level of like resolve and understanding of like, I had to do this, he would have killed all of you. It was us or her. And being able to convey that through like the faces of children. And when they are, Isaac, when he figures out like the plan, right? As he's leaving the control, like you get a sense on his face of just like, there is a resolve and a confidence that, yeah, like I'm the smartest guy here, like I know what I'm doing. And at the same time, 4 issues earlier, you can see how scared and alone he was,
right?
So I think the way that Walter drew these characters, the way that he's able to make those expressions, because he's not a photorealistic artist, he's also not like a hyper cartoony artist. He's somewhere kind of in between, which I think I appreciate. And
well, and my only other exposure to him was The Vision.
Well, I was gonna say, and it's interesting to think about because he's most well known specifically for The Vision. And a big thing about The Vision and his family is like they're synthezoids. So you don't see expression on their face.
It was perfect for this. Except that you could somehow still read it in their eyes, even though they weren't expressive.
Yeah.
I still remember like some of the greatest art in the last 10 years of Marvel Comics. If Vision might be older than that now, but 15 years.
Vision's about 10 years. It's like 2014, 2015. Yeah.
There's the issue with the bouncing red ball, which was brilliantly written by Tom King, but absolutely dependent on the execution of like the recurring bouncing, 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 and
Yeah.
then it breaks through a window, and at the end it bounces into, a dead body across the street, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. Um, so because it kind of felt like Toby's Ball in the West Wing,
Exactly. Yep.
um,
Yep.
where there
Yep.
was like just this recurring plot device, and you're like, okay, that's kind of cool,
Yeah.
whatever. And then just you could just hear that
Yeah.
ponging sound of like a handball
Mhm.
bouncing. And then you can hear when it stops bouncing,
Yes.
and
Which
it's
is
a
when he figures it
visual
out.
medium.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's
Um,
bouncing. You hear it hit the floor, hit the wall, hit his hand, hit the floor, hit the wall, hit his hand. And each sound
exactly.
is different. And they do it enough so when it stops in his hand and it's not immediately followed by another throw, you know that something has changed. And you're right that the
Oh,
way that
it's
they were
so
able to
good.
they were able to depict that in the vision, the way that Walter was able to do that with a similar idea, a similar kind of recurring motif. Recurring motif, is that redundant? Probably is. Uh,
I don't
because
think it is redundant. I think you're in the clear.
okay, all right. Anyway, this is the idea of being able to do that, and I agree entirely. The idea that even though the way that he drew the visions, being synthezoids and not having the most expressive faces, because that's kind of the whole idea, but still being able to get things across with little eye movement, slight ways that they change kind of the shape of the mouth and all that. You still get that across. And then he gets to a book like this when he has like full human faces to deal with and really gets to show kind of that level of expressiveness. You see the terror in the parents' eyes as they realize things are going south. Again, you see that terror, that confusion in the children's eyes, the steely resolve, the panic in Lil's eyes when they're at the refinery and she runs into that lone survivor. You get all of these things, and it I think it helps heighten the situation there because we know that they're children, and so there is an inherent need for protection, right? That comes with focusing a story on children, right?
Right.
That most readers, maybe not every reader has, even those without children like myself, this idea of this need to be protective of like they shouldn't be doing this, right? You shouldn't have to be going through this. And so this idea of wanting to help, needing to help, feeling the urge to help, and then getting across all those emotions through the characters, I think is something that Walter did an amazing job with this book.
Yeah. I cannot find that issue. No one, Google doesn't know what I mean when I say the bouncing ball
You'd have
issue
to
of
you'd
Vision.
have to go
And I haven't read it
and flip through it.
in probably close to 10 years.
Yeah, it's been a little while since I've revisited Vision. I should do
But
that now that I've reread this and saw Walter's work again, and had been reading it with the other book he's doing with Lemire, Phantom Road right now. I should go back and revisit the Vision again. I think I reread it when WandaVision came out, but that was like 4 or 5 years ago at this point now. So it's
yeah,
probably
but
about
now
time for
Vision
another
Quest is
revisit.
coming out this year.
It
So
is, yeah. You can gotta
we'll
get
have
back into it now. So
brush up on Vision. That actually would be fun. Not that it will relate to Vision Quest at all, but if we did
yeah.
like before Vision Quest drops, we do a Tom King Vision.
Yeah, but yeah. WandaVision was probably more that route there, but yeah, Walter is really he's really really great. I like his style. There's a simplicity to it. He's not overly complicated, but again, it's not super cartoony. It's not hyper realistic. But there's something about it that there's a quality to it that I really enjoy and like.
And it's clean. Like you're
Yeah.
never wondering what's happening. Like he
Mhm.
doesn't play with perspective in weird ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where like there's such a natural reading flow to his art.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to take. He's not trying to make the biggest swings out sometimes, and sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't. I think with him, it is a pretty straightforward kind of paneling and perspective. It gets the job done. It works, and I think having read this and having read and currently reading Phantom Road, there's something to his collaboration with Lemire that I don't think requires a lot of text. There's a lot of pages and panels with minimal to no dialogue, no words. Not that there's silent issues or pages or whatnot, but there's a lot that I think Lemire trusts Walta with in terms of getting you from point A to point B story.
And this was their first collaboration ever, right? The two of them?
Them directly, yes. Like, I believe they had worked. Right before this, I believe he had done the Barbalian miniseries in the Black Hole universe. But those scripts were written by Tate Brombill, but Brombill and Lemire are credited as story because obviously it comes from Lemire's universe. But I do believe that like 5-issue miniseries had come out before,
which was great, by the way.
Yeah, and then I think Lemire started working with Walta directly on this, and then now currently on Phantom Road. So, it's another person that when we've talked about Lemire, we talk about obviously his work that he does on his own, but the set of recurring artists he always goes back to. Dustin Nguyen, Andrea Sorrentino, these are people that he goes back to and has done multiple books with because there's something about that collaboration that he loves. And it brings, I think all those different artists bring something different out of Lemire, something he can kind of tap into. And I think kind of the sci-fi aspect is something that he pulls a little more out of with Walta, in both Sentient and Phantom Road had that kind of sense there to it. So yeah, I love Phantom Road. I enjoy it, but if these two guys want to keep working and do another book, like, I'd be all for it because I think the partnership's really great.
Yeah. Incredible amount of trust for first time collaboration and I'm going to say knowing Lemire as I do, I don't know him personally, but knowing his work as I do and his, interviews and even the memoir he's written, I kind of suspect he handed all 5 scripts at the same time to Walta, especially for a TKO project like this.
He is someone, I think we mentioned this before, where I know he's talked about in an interview, is like, the thing that I'm working on now is not the next thing coming out. It's the thing after the next thing. Because whatever he's working, like, there's the book that's coming out, the book that's already done, that's coming out next, and the thing he's working on now, which is coming out sometime. So he's always super far ahead. I think that's just how he works, whether it's something.
It's very rewarding to be a big Lemire fan.
Yeah, because he is someone that I don't think misses deadlines, because he is someone that I think he goes to his studio and works like an 8-hour day like a normal person does. And, he's just writing and drawing comics though. But he treats it in the same way. And yeah, I don't think he's someone who's late. I think, and I imagine that's why artists and collaborators like working with him, because he's someone like there is a trust. He trusts them as creatives and as storytellers and as collaborators, but I think clearly they trust him just as someone that's going to get stuff to them on time, that's going to be reliable, because those guys can't do their job until he starts it. You can collaborate all you want, you can talk about the story and plan all you want, but that script's got to come. You got to get that script first so they can start on their pages, so it can go to the next guy, the next guy, the next step, and he seems to be someone that does that. And again, I think the fact that he has so many artists that he recurs with different titles, I think that speaks more to kind of who he is as a professional and as a collaborator than anything else. Just knowing that people want to work with him over and over again, across many, many, many years, decades at this point, probably. The fact that they keep going like, yeah, another story, let's do it. I think that speaks to his character and the kind of person that he is, and the kind of person you want to work with. So, he seems to rule, And the one time I met him at a con, could not have been more Canadian and nicer. Like, every joke about how polite Canadians are. I may have said this years ago when we first covered him, but I was supposed to see him when I was in Toronto, a Comic-Con in Toronto, which is his hometown. And he had to cancel like the morning of the first day. So I had a bunch of stuff for him there. And like got to the show and realized he had to cancel because it wasn't announced anywhere. It was like I guess he called the con and didn't show up. I was able to see him like 7, 8 months later at a show in Richmond, Virginia, my old hometown, and I mentioned that to him. I was like, "Yeah, and I was up at Fan Expo Canada, and you were there, and then you couldn't make it, but I glad I'm here now." And he was like, "Oh yeah, sorry about," like he apologized to me,
Yeah.
like for not being there. I was like, dude, I'm just mentioning that in terms of like this is why I've got this huge stack of books.
Right. This is why I'm
signed.
excited to see you.
Yeah, it's like I'm bringing it here because I'm not.
I think
I'm
he
not,
does owe me an apology though, because now that I've read his memoir, when I was in Toronto last time, I did, my normal version of tourism, which is just go to every comic shop in town.
Yep.
And the one I spent 4.5 hours and met someone that I'm still friends with in that shop. I found out in his memoir that is his shop. That's the one he goes to. And I was there on a Wednesday, and I'm like, shame on you, Jeff, for working and not coming mid, lunch break to collect your comics.
Hey, he might be a weekend warrior. During the week he's got stuff to do. So
I think he's a 9 to 5 worker. Like I think he would go after work. Yeah, if
he
anything.
definitely is. He works, but I mean, maybe he picks his books up on Saturday. You never know. So
that, and I was like looking through Jeff Lemire titles just in case he's one of those guys who like goes in and signs things and
secretly
puts them back
stuff.
in the I think he's too busy for that.
Yeah.
Although I think he does love his fans enough that he would do that, if it occurred to him. But I'm sure
probably doesn't. Yeah.
If I asked that shop, they would have said like, "Oh yeah, we got a box of signed Jeff stuff." And
yeah, I'm sure that's the place he probably does signings on the regular on, right? Like, if a new book comes out, he probably that's probably a place that he goes. So, but yeah, he was super awesome the one time I've met him, and he is someone that he was on that bucket list of like, got to meet this guy. And if I have a chance to, I'm bringing everything I have. And I had a stack of stuff to sign, and he was awesome. He did some sketches and some stuff. It was so great. But yeah, he's awesome. I would love to get a chance to meet him again because I have so much more stuff for him to sign, including a book like Sentient.
Yeah. I have signed books from him, but I've never gotten to meet him, which is, I don't think I'll ever do that again. It was like again, I was bored during COVID.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a valid caveat in terms of like, hey man, we got to try to support creators this way if they're doing stuff. Cause I have stuff as well that
there's nothing more Jeff than this. The money from the signatures were going to charity, not even to him.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it was like you send your book in and you pay, I don't know, $70 per book. You mail it to CGC. CGC will mail them all to Jeff. Jeff will sign them.
CGC one, okay.
Mail them all back. They'll slab them and then mail them back to you. $70 a book. I'm like, that's actually not crazy. Because I would pay $20 a signature for him. Slabbing is easily $20-$30. And it was all going to charity anyway.
His stuff was all free at the show when I saw him. I had a big stack of stuff, signed it all for free. So
yeah. I would still pay $20. Like I'd like that's how bad how badly I would like to see him. So yeah, if he ever announces something stateside like C2E2, that would be, I think, the final push to get me to go to one of those big shows.
Well, yeah, I'll keep an eye out there. But yeah, this is this is one that I would take because it's one that I think is probably on the lesser known side from, because again, I don't know how many people know about TKO.
Yeah, but can you imagine trying to fit this in your box or your backpack? Where it just sticks up higher than the other books and doesn't fit in a bag.
I don't want to think about a big old pain in the butt trying to do that there. But yeah, I think this is, I think that this kind of spin, to start off this lonely sci-fi theme that we have going, I think it's an interesting one when we get to next week, the idea of like true singular isolation. Right, versus a group of people, group of children, set us, kind of isolated in space on their own, against their will. Right, as we tease our next book, Traveling to Mars, we have a single person going off on space willingly, and someone choosing to have that isolation, that loneliness, that separation, and kind of what that exploration looks like, and especially what it looks like through the mind of someone like Mark Russell. So
yeah. Caveat: he chooses it. There is some coercion, there's some catch to him choosing. But yes, he does
still,
choose and
does
not regret the choice.
Yeah. But it is different than, say, something that we'll probably bring up. We already mentioned it in like The Martian, right? Matt Damon's character chose to go to space and to go to Mars. He didn't choose to get stuck there by himself, though, right? So there's
the true juxtaposition is Project Hail Mary. Great book, movie coming out this year with Ryan Gosling. He literally wakes up because he had refused this mission, and they were like, "The Earth needs you." They knocked him out, stuck him on a ship, and when he wakes up, his short-term memory is gone. So the storytelling is him exploring the ship while his memory starts coming back to him. So like,
as we the reader get that,
right. Yeah. So we the reader are getting it, and it's moving backward through time to figure out how he ended up in the situation, while also moving forward through time as he's really great book that I think, based on the early teaser, looks like they're going to do it justice. But anyway,
I can't wait. So next week we mentioned Traveling to Mars by Mark Russell.
It's a bigger one. Take some time to read it, because it's 11 issues,
but
it is 5 here.
It is just one trade, and it is not like it was ever broken up into multiple volumes, which it easily could have been. Just for 11, you could have done 5 and 6 or something like that. Many books have, but if you go find this, it's probably going to be in the trade, just one volume. So it's a little beefier to get through, but I think it's a rewarding, and it'll be a fun and interesting comparison point with Sentient, with the book we just read. When we look at these two books together side by side. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening. Find us storydarks.com, Instagram Storydarks, Blue Sky Storydarks, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.